I was 5 years old when my parents brought Zoe home from the hospital. Tiny, red-faced and screaming. I remember thinking she looked like one of those wrinkled pugs my aunt kept in her purse. But my mother placed her in my arms, and something shifted in me. "You're her big sister now, Riley," she said. "She's going to look up to you her whole life." 27 years later, I'm not sure if that was a blessing or a curse. Growing up in Nashville meant two things: sweet tea on summer porches and music pouring from every corner of the city. Our father played guitar in small venues around town, never quite made it big, but enough to keep the lights on and put food on the table. He'd come home after midnight, guitar case in hand, smelling of cigarette smoke and broken dreams. But he always stopped by our rooms first, kissing our foreheads, promising us the world. "My girls are going to have everything I didn't," he'd whisper, even when he thought we were sleeping. I believed him. I think Zoe believed him too, at least until she realized she could take matters into her own hands. Music was in our blood. I started playing piano at 6, picked up the guitar at 9, and by 13, I was writing my own songs. Not the kind that would ever make it to the radio. They were raw, honest pieces about what I saw in the world. Too dark, Dad would say. Too real for Nashville's shiny boots and rhinestone aesthetic. But Zoe? She was sunshine packaged in a 5'2" frame. By the time she was 14, she could belt out notes that made strangers stop in their tracks. When she sang, it was like watching someone born to command a stage, and she knew it. "You could be doing this too," she'd tell me after performing at school talent shows, the crowd still vibrating with her energy. "Your songs are better than anything I could write." I'm not the performer type, I'd say, and I meant it. I was content writing songs in our attic bedroom, the skylight my only audience. I was 22 when Dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't negotiate, doesn't compromise. Doctors gave him 8 months, he lasted 5. I dropped out of college to help Mom with the bills, took a job managing a local music store. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep us afloat. Zoe was 17 then, just starting to get noticed around town. Small gigs, open mic nights, nothing major, but people remembered her name after she performed. While I arranged funeral details and sorted through medical bills, Zoe was recording covers on her phone, posting them online. I didn't begrudge her that escape. We all cope differently with grief. The night before Dad's funeral, I found her sitting on our roof, staring at the Nashville skyline. "You should come in," I said, climbing out to join her. "Mom's finally asleep. I'm not going tomorrow," she said, her voice flat. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What do you mean?" "Brent Thompson is going to be at the Bluebird tomorrow. He's scouting for new talent." She turned to me, eyes gleaming with something I couldn't quite place. "This could be it, Riley. My big break." My chest tightened. "Dad's funeral is tomorrow." "Dad's gone," she said, so matter-of-factly it made my skin crawl. "He's not going to know if I'm there or not. But this opportunity might never come again." "Are you listening to yourself?" I whispered, afraid that if I spoke any louder, I might never stop screaming. "This is Dad we're talking about, the man who taught you your first chord. Who drove you to every single one of your performances?" She looked away. "He'd want me to go. You know he would." I didn't speak to her that night, or the next day when she slipped out the back door in her best dress, guitar case in hand, while Mom and I dressed in black. Or the week after when she burst through the front door, waving a business card like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Brent wants to represent me," she announced, oblivious to the fact that Mom had barely left her bedroom in days. "He thinks I have what it takes." And just like that, Zoe began her ascent. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs, the subtle shifts in her personality, the way she started dressing differently, talking differently, as if trying on a new skin. Brent convinced her to drop her last name, our father's name, and go simply by Zoe Blue. More marketable, he said. Less forgettable. I continued working at the music store, picking up extra shifts to help Mom, who had sunk into a depression so deep I feared she might never surface. 6 months after Dad died, Zoe moved out. Not just out of the house, out of Nashville entirely. LA is where it's happening, she explained, throwing clothes into a suitcase while I stood in her doorway. Brent's got connections there, people who can make things happen. What about Mom? I asked. Zoe paused, glancing around the room that still held remnants of her childhood. She has you. And just like that, I became the only daughter. The responsible one. The one who stayed. For 2 years, we heard from Zoe sporadically. Brief, calls on birthdays and holidays. The occasional check in the mail when Mom needed a medical procedure our insurance wouldn't cover. I'd tune into her Instagram lives, watching her life unfold in filtered squares, rooftop parties, recording studios, famous faces I recognized from magazines. Then came the song. Her breakthrough single, Brent called it. The one that would put her on the map. I was restocking guitars when the store manager turned up the radio. "Isn't this your sister?" he asked. The melody hit me first, hauntingly familiar. Then the lyrics, poetic in their simplicity, raw in their emotion. By the chorus, my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped a $3,000 Gibson. It was my song, the one I'd written the night after Dad died, sitting on our roof, pouring my grief onto paper. Every word, every note, mine. Only the voice was hers. I called her that night, hands trembling as I dialed. "Isn't it amazing?" She gushed before I could speak. "Brent says it's going to be huge. We're already getting radio play across 3 states. "That's my song," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. A pause. Then, "What are you talking about?" "Skylight Serenade." I wrote it. For Dad, the night after he died. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, calculating her response. "Riley," she finally said, her voice gentle, as if explaining something to a child. "I know you wrote some songs back in the day, but this is different. Professional. I worked on this with top writers in LA. "You stole it," I said, my voice breaking. "You stole my song, Zoe." "I think grief is making you confused," she replied, still in that gentle tone that made me want to reach through the phone and shake her. "Maybe you wrote something similar once. Creative minds think alike, right? Especially sisters." I hung up. What else could I do? I had no proof, no recordings, no copyright. Just words on paper and a notebook tucked under my mattress. A notebook that had mysteriously disappeared around the time Zoe left for LA. Skylight Serenade climbed the charts over the next few weeks. I heard it everywhere. Grocery stores, coffee shops from passing cars with their windows down. Each time it was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. My pain, my words, my grief, all packaged and sold with Zoe's face on the cover. Mom was thrilled, of course. "Your sister's finally made it," she'd say, turning up the volume whenever the song came on. She didn't know. I couldn't tell her. The song had brought her back to life in a way nothing else had since Dad died. Who was I to take that away? 3 months later, Zoe was nominated for a Breakthrough Artist Award. 5 months later, she appeared on the cover of Rolling Stone, dubbed Nashville's newest star, though she'd long abandoned Nashville for the glitz of Los Angeles. 8 months later, she won her first Grammy. I watched the ceremony alone in our living room, Mom having gone to bed early after working a double shift at the diner. Zoe looked like a stranger on that stage, hair lighter, face thinner, clothes designer. But it was her acceptance speech that turned my blood to ice. "I'd like to thank my father, who taught me everything I know about music before he passed," she said, clutching the golden gramophone to her chest. This song was born from the grief of losing him. Every word came from the deepest part of my heart. My phone pinged with a text from an unknown number later that night. Congrats to your sister. Just saw the show. Shame about her stealing your song, though. I still remember you playing it at the store after hours. Jake, former co-worker. I stared at the message for a long time. Someone remembered. Someone knew the truth. That's when I realized. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't misremembering. Zoe had stolen from me, and she'd built her entire career on my grief. The next morning, I requested a week off from work. I told Mom I needed a mental health break. Not entirely a lie. I packed a small suitcase, withdrew my meager savings, and booked a one-way ticket to Los Angeles. If Zoe thought she could erase me from her story, she was about to learn how wrong she was. I wasn't going to fade quietly into the background of her shiny new life. I was done being the responsible one, the one who stayed, the one who sacrificed. It was time for the truth to come out, no matter how many careers it destroyed in the process. The plane lifted off from Nashville. I looked down at the shrinking city lights. Somewhere down there was the roof where I'd written Skylight Serenade, where I'd poured my heart onto paper under a canopy of stars. I'd never imagined those words would make someone famous. I certainly never imagined that someone would be my sister. But life has a funny way of writing its own lyrics. And this song? It was far from over. From over. Los Angeles hit me like a wall of heat and fakery the moment I stepped off the plane. No gradual descent into madness here, just instant immersion into a world where everyone looked airbrushed in real life. I clutched my worn duffel bag tighter, feeling suddenly self-conscious in my thrift store jeans and faded band t-shirt. I'd tracked down Zoe's address through a combination of social media stalking and one well-placed call to Mom's cousin who worked for a celebrity tour bus company. Beverly Hills, of course. Where else would Nashville's rising star settle but in the epicenter of excess? The Uber driver whistled low when I gave him the address. You friends with someone fancy, huh? Family, I said, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. The neighborhood was exactly as I'd imagined. Palm trees standing like sentinels along streets too clean to be real. Houses hidden behind walls and security gates. The kind of extravagant privacy only money could buy. We pulled up to a sprawling white mansion with a circular driveway and a fountain featuring what appeared to be a life-sized mermaid spitting water toward the sky. You sure this is where you're going? The driver asked, clearly doubting someone like me belonged in a place like this. I nodded, paid, and stepped out into the California sunshine that somehow felt more deliberate than the honest heat back home. The T. Security guard at the gate eyed me suspiciously when I approached. Name? Riley Calloway. I'm Zoe Blue's sister. He checked something on his tablet, then smirked. Not on the approved list. Of course I wasn't. Why would Zoe include the sister she'd left behind on her visitor list? The sister whose song had bought her this mansion. Could you call and let her know I'm here? It's important. He sighed the sigh of a man who dealt with desperate people claiming connections to celebrities every day. But he made the call. 2 minutes later, the massive gates began to open. Zoe wasn't home, a small blessing. Instead, I was greeted by a young woman with a sleek ponytail and an earpiece who introduced herself as Mara, Zoe's personal assistant. She's at a photo shoot until this evening, Mara explained, leading me through a foyer bigger than our entire house in Nashville. But, she said, you can wait. There's a guest room prepared. The guest room was larger than my apartment back home, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an infinity pool that seemed to drop off into the horizon. I set my bag down on a bed that probably cost more than my car. Bathroom's through there, Mara said, pointing to a door. Kitchen's downstairs if you get hungry. Zoe said to make yourself comfortable. She should be back around 7. When Mara left, I did what any self-respecting, betrayed sister would do. I snooped. The house was a monument to Zoe's success. Platinum records on walls, framed magazine covers, shelves lined with awards. In her sleek, minimalist office, I found what I was looking for. A bookshelf containing journals. Dozens of them, all leather-bound, color-coded by year. And there, on the bottom shelf, was my missing notebook. The faded blue spiral-bound one with a coffee stain on the cover. The one that contained Skylight Serenade and a dozen other songs I'd written during the darkest period of my life. My hands shook as I flipped through it, finding pages torn out, the pages with my best work. I continued searching and found those missing pages tucked inside a folder labeled Source Material. Source material. Like my life, my grief, my talent were just raw ingredients for her to refine and profit from. I photographed everything with my phone, heart pounding against my ribs. Then I returned everything exactly as I'd found it and went back to the guest room to wait. Zoe arrived at 8, not 7. I heard her before I saw her, laughing with someone in the foyer, her voice carrying through the massive house with the practiced projection of someone used to being heard. I made my way downstairs, stopping halfway to watch her. She was even more beautiful in person than on screen. Glowing skin, perfect hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than 3 months of Mom's salary. The man with her was tall, silver-haired, expensive watch glinting under the chandelier. Light. Brent Thompson, I assumed. The manager who had convinced her to abandon our father's funeral. Zoe spotted me first. For just a moment, a fraction of a second so brief I almost missed it, naked panic flashed across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by a brilliant smile. "Riley!" she exclaimed, rushing forward to embrace me. She smelled expensive, like flowers that had never seen actual dirt. What a surprise! Why didn't you tell me you were coming? Because you would have told me not to, I thought. But I smiled and returned her hug stiffly. Spontaneous trip. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay. You're my sister. She turned. To the man. Brent, this is Riley, my big sister from Nashville. Brent stepped forward, extending a manicured hand. The famous Riley. Zoe's told me so much about you. I highly doubted that, but I shook his hand anyway. Fascinating. She hardly mentions you at all. His smile tightened. Zoe laughed too loudly. Riley's always had that dry sense of humor. She said quickly, Brent, we'll finish discussing the tour details tomorrow, okay? After he left, Zoe guided me to a sleek kitchen where everything was white and stainless steel. She poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. So, she said, leaning against the counter, to what do I owe this visit? Is Mom okay? Mom's fine, I replied, taking a sip of wine I was too agitated to appreciate. Working 60 hours a week at the diner, but fine. Guilt flashed briefly across Zoe's face. I send money. Occasionally. When you remember. She sighed. Riley, I know you've always been the responsible one, and I appreciate everything you do for Mom. But I'm building something here. Something big. The money will come, and then Mom will never have to work again. That's very generous, I said, setting down my glass. Especially considering how much success you've had with my songs. The room went so quiet I could hear the hum of the expensive refrigerator. Zoe's face didn't change, but her knuckles whitened around her wine glass. We've been through this, she said softly. You're confused. I found my notebook, Zoe, in your office, along with the pages you tore out and filed as source material. So let's not play this game anymore. She stared at me for a long moment, then set her glass down with deliberate care. Fine. Yes, I took your notebook. Yes, I used some of your lyrics, some of your melodies. But do you know what I did that you never would have? I took them to people who could do something with them. I performed them in a way people wanted to hear. I made them successful. You stole from me. I elevated your work. Her voice rose, then she caught herself inhaling slowly. Riley, be realistic. You were never going to do anything with those songs. They would have sat in that notebook forever, under your bed in that depressing little house. I gave them life. Without my permission. Without even acknowledging me. And what would acknowledging you have done except complicate everything? The industry doesn't want messy co-writing credits between sisters. They want a clean, simple story. One voice, one vision. Your voice, your vision, my work. She ran a hand through her perfect hair. What do you want, Riley? Money? Fine. I'll write you a check right now. Name your price. The casual way she said it, like paying off an inconvenient parking ticket, made something snap inside me. I don't want your money, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I want credit for my work. Public acknowledgement that Skylight Serenade and any other songs you've taken from my notebook are mine. Zoe laughed, but there was no humor in it. You can't be serious. Do you have any idea what that would do to my career? To my reputation? I don't particularly care. Well, you should. Because bringing me down won't lift you up. All it will do is destroy everything I've built. Maybe that's exactly what needs to happen, I said quietly. She studied me, her expression hardening into something I'd never seen before, something calculated and cold that made her look like a stranger. You won't do it, she finally said. You won't hurt Mom like that. And there it was, her trump card. Mom, who had finally found joy again through Zoe's success. Mom, who proudly told everyone at the diner about her famous daughter. Mom, who didn't know that her daughter's relationship had fractured beyond repair. Sleep on it, Zoe said. Softer. Joey, we'll talk more tomorrow. Maybe we can find a compromise. But when I woke the next morning, Zoe was gone. A note on the kitchen counter informed me she'd been called away for an emergency meeting and would be back the following day. Convenient. I spent the day exploring her house, taking more photos of evidence. In her home studio, I found tracks. On her computer, demos of my songs with her voice layered over basic melodies I recognized as my own. In another folder, I found emails between her and producers discussing Skylight Serenade, including one where she specifically instructed them to tweak the bridge enough that it's not identical to the original. The original. My version. By evening, I'd compiled enough evidence to make a solid case for theft. I could take it public. Social media, music blogs, entertainment news. It would create exactly the kind of scandal Zoe feared. Her perfect image would shatter overnight. Shatter overnight. Shatter. But something kept me from pulling the trigger. Not concern for Zoe. She'd made her choices. No, it was something else. A realization that had been forming since I arrived in this monument to stolen success. Destroying Zoe's career wouldn't give me back what I'd lost. It wouldn't restore the years I'd spent supporting Mom while Zoe chased fame. It wouldn't bring Dad back or heal the wounds of betrayal. What I needed wasn't revenge. It was leverage. That night, I called Jake, my former coworker who'd texted me after the Grammy Awards. Remember how you said you heard me play Skylight? Serenade at the store? I asked when he answered. Yeah, months before your sister released it. Why? Would you be willing to sign a statement confirming that? There was a pause. Is this going to cause trouble? I don't want drama. No drama, I promised. Just setting some things right. He agreed. One witness secured. I spent the rest of the night sending similar messages to anyone who might have heard me play my original songs before Zoe made them famous. By morning, I had 3 more people willing to confirm they'd heard my versions first. When Zoe returned the following afternoon, I was waiting in her living room with a folder containing printouts of everything I'd found, along with the statements from my witnesses. We need to talk, I said as she walked in, designer sunglasses still perched on her head. She looked at the folder in my hands, then at my face. Something in my expression must have told her this wasn't a negotiation. "Fine," she said, dropping her bag on a nearby chair. "Talk." I laid out my terms clearly. I wanted credit as co-writer on Skylight Serenade and any other songs of mine she'd used. I wanted a percentage of the royalties, not enough to hurt her, just enough to ensure Mom never had to work another day in her life. And I wanted a public acknowledgement of my contribution to her success. "If you refuse," I concluded, "these documents go to every music blog and entertainment outlet in the country by tomorrow morning." Zoe paced the room as I spoke, her face cycling through emotions: anger, fear, calculation, and finally, a sort of grudging respect. "You've thought this through," she said. "I learned from the best. You've always been strategic about getting what you want." She picked up the folder, flipped through it. "Some of this would be your word against mine." "Maybe. But are you willing to take that chance? Your entire image is built on authenticity, on the narrative that you poured your grief over Dad into these songs. How do you think your fans will react when they learn that was a lie?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'll need to talk to Brent and my label." "You have 24 hours, I said, standing to leave. "I'm staying at the Marriott downtown. Call me when you've made your decision." As I walked toward the door, she called after me. "Riley?" I turned. For what it's worth, I did try to write my own songs. After The Notebook. But nothing was ever as good as yours. I studied my sister, this person I'd once protected, once loved, unconditionally. Now a stranger in designer clothes standing in a house built on lies. "That's because you never really grieved him," I said softly. "You can't write about pain you refuse to feel." I left her standing there, surrounded by all, her hollow success. The next morning, Brent Thompson called me himself. They were prepared to meet my terms, with one condition. The acknowledgement of my contribution would be positioned as a collaboration between sisters that had been planned from the start. The narrative would be that I preferred to stay behind, the scenes while Zoe took the spotlight, a mutual decision made years ago, a pretty lie to cover an ugly truth, but one I could live with. 2 weeks later, the press release went out. Singer Zoe Blue reveals sister collaboration behind hit songs. Entertainment outlets painted it as a heartwarming story of sisterly support. The talented performer and her equally talented but spotlight-shy sister, creating music together to honor their late father. The royalty check started coming soon after. The first one I sent directly to Mom with a note explaining that she could finally retire. She called me crying, not understanding where the money had come from until I explained the collaboration Zoe and I had kept secret. "I always knew you were writing songs," she said through tears. "But I never imagined they were good enough for this." I didn't correct her assumption that Zoe and I had been working together all along. Some truths are too painful to serve any purpose. As for Zoe and me, we established a new relationship. Not the close bond we once had, but a professional partnership built on mutual benefit and very clear boundaries. She would consult me before using any more of my work, and I would receive proper credit and compensation. I still wrote songs, better ones now that I wasn't weighed down by resentment and betrayal. Some I gave to Zoe, others I kept for myself, eventually sharing them with a small but growing audience at the cafe where I started performing on weekends. I never became famous like my sister. I never lived in a mansion or won awards or saw my face on magazine covers. But I reclaimed my voice, my work, my truth, and sometimes that's the sweetest revenge of all. Fame is a curious creature. It feeds on attention, grows with adoration, and can vanish in an instant when the spotlight shifts. I learned this not through my own experience, but by watching my sister's carefully constructed empire begin to crumble. exactly 1 year after our collaboration was announced. The first sign came during a routine interview. Zoe was promoting her new album, one filled with songs I hadn't written, when the interviewer casually mentioned our partnership. "Your Sister Riley's songwriting brought such depth to your earlier work," he said. "Will we hear more of that magic on this album?" I watched the live stream from my apartment in Nashville, noting how Zoe's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "This album represents a new direction for me," she replied smoothly. "Riley's brilliance influenced my early sound, but artists have to evolve." The album dropped the following week to lukewarm reviews. Lacking the emotional resonance of her breakthrough work, one critic wrote. The raw vulnerability that made Skylight Serenade so compelling is noticeably absent, said. Another sales were disappointing. Streaming numbers failed to match projections. For the first time since her meteoric rise, Zoe Blue was struggling. I didn't feel the vindication I might have expected. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness watching her falter. This wasn't what I had wanted. I hadn't forced this compromise to watch her fail. I'd done it to reclaim what was mine while allowing her to continue her success. 3 months after the album's release, my phone rang at 2 a.m. I fumbled for it in the dark, squinting at the screen. Zoe. We hadn't spoken directly in weeks, our communication filtered through lawyers and managers. "Hello?" I answered, voice thick with sleep. "I need your help." Her voice was small, nothing, like the confident persona she projected to the world. I sat up, suddenly alert. "What's wrong, is it, Mom?" "No, nothing like that." She paused. It's the music. I can't write. Nothing's working." I didn't speak. Let her fill the silence. The label's threatening to drop me if the next single doesn't perform. Brent says, "I need to get back to my roots, whatever that means." She laughed, a hollow sound. "Turns out my roots were always you." "What exactly are you asking, Zoe?" Though I already knew. "I need songs. Your songs. Like before." The sheer audacity of it, after everything, should have made me hang up. Instead, I found myself asking, and what would I get in return this time? Full credit from the start, equal billing, equal share of royalties, whatever you want. And Brent? He's okay with this? Another empty laugh. Brent's gone, jumped ship when the numbers came in. Apparently, I'm difficult to work with when I'm not succeeding. I thought of our father then, of his countless rejections, his resilience, his unwavering belief that his daughters would have the opportunities he never did. What would he think of us now? One daughter famous but floundering, the other finally recognized but still in the shadows. "I'll think about it," I said, and ended the call. For days, I wrestled with her request. Part of me, the part still wounded by her betrayal, wanted to refuse, to let her experience the failure she'd been insulated from by stealing my work. But another part remembered the 5-year-old who'd looked at me with wonder, the teenager who'd told me my songs were better than anything she could write. I didn't call her back. Instead, I booked a flight to Los Angeles. Her mansion looked different this time, less imposing somehow. The fountain was turned off. The hedges needed trimming. Small signs of neglect that spoke volumes. Zoe answered the door herself. No assistant, this time. She looked thinner. The perfect California glow dimmed, dark circles under her eyes visible despite expensive concealer. Riley. Her surprise seemed genuine. "I didn't know you were coming." "Spontaneous trip," I echoed her words from a year ago. "I hope that's okay." She stepped aside to let me in. The house was quieter, the trophy wall looking more like a museum to past glories than a testament to ongoing success. "I've been thinking about your call," I said, following her into the kitchen. It was messier than before. Dishes in the sink, takeout containers on the counter, signs of a life unraveling in small ways. And? Her voice held a note of desperation she couldn't quite disguise. I set my bag on the counter and pulled out a folder. I brought you something. She opened it cautiously, as if expecting legal papers or more evidence against her. Instead, she found sheet music. 5 songs, complete with lyrics and notations. "What is this?" she asked, though she was already scanning the first page, her musician's eyes taking in the melodies. "New material, not my old stuff. These are songs I wrote recently." Hope flickered across her face. "For me?" "With you," I corrected. "That's my condition. We write together, actually collaborate. No more pretending." She looked up from the papers, studying my face. "Why would you help me after everything?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly on the flight over. "Because I'm tired of being angry," I said honestly. "Because despite everything, you're still my sister. And because I think we could make something incredible if we actually worked together." The I label might not go for it, she said, but she was still clutching the sheets, eyes repeatedly drawn back to the lyrics. "Then we find a new label, or we release independently. You still have a platform, Zoe. You still have fans. What you lost was your voice. Your authentic voice. I think we can find it again." She was quiet for a long moment, looking down at the music in her hands. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry. For everything. For taking your songs. For cutting you out. For making you feel like you didn't matter." It wasn't dramatic. No tears, no grand gestures. Just a simple acknowledgement of the truth we'd been dancing around for years. "I know," I said. "Do you think we can fix this?" she asked, gesturing vaguely. "Between us." "Not just the music, us." "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I think it's worth trying." We spent the next 3 days in her home studio. I showed her the bones of the songs I'd brought, and she added flourishes, suggested key changes, rewrote bridges. For the first time, we were truly collaborative, each bringing our strengths to the table. It wasn't easy. Years of resentment and betrayal don't dissolve overnight. There were moments of tension, flashes of the old power dynamics attempting to reassert themselves. But there were also breakthrough moments, harmonies that made us both stop and look at each other in wonder, lyrics that brought unexpected tears. On the 4th day, we recorded a demo of what we both agreed was the strongest track, a song called Prodigal, about returning home after losing your way. Zoe's voice had a new quality to it, rawer, more vulnerable than the polished sound she'd cultivated in recent years. "This is it," she said when we played it back. "This is what's been missing." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of pride and caution. The question is what we do with it. We debated our options late into the night. Approach her current label. With the new direction, seek out a smaller indie label that might give us more creative control. Release it ourselves and see what happened. In the end, we decided on a path neither of us had initially considered. 1 week later, a new video appeared on Zoe's YouTube channel. It opened not with her face, as all her previous videos had, but with 2 pairs of hands on a piano. Hers, manicured and adorned with designer rings, and mine, plain and practical. The camera pulled back to reveal us sitting side by side on the bench, an image that immediately set social media buzzing. "This is Prodigal," Zoe said simply to the camera. Written and performed by Zoe Blue and Riley Calloway. We performed. The song, acoustically, just piano, 2 voices blending in the harmonies we'd perfected over the past week. When it was over, Zoe looked directly into the camera again. For those who don't know, Riley is my sister. She's also the most talented songwriter I've ever known. She co-wrote many of my early songs, including Skylight Serenade. For too long, I allowed her contribution to remain in the shadows. This new project is about bringing her into the light where she belongs. I hadn't known she was going to say that. We'd agreed to acknowledge our partnership, But this complete honesty, this public admission that went beyond our legal agreement, was unexpected. The video went viral within hours. Music blogs picked up the story. Entertainment news featured clips. Zoe Blue's stunning revelation and musical reinvention read one headline. Sister Act, the truth behind Zoe Blue's hit songs, read another. Prodigal shot to the top of streaming charts. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know more about the mysterious sister who had been the secret ingredient in Zoe Blue's success. Interview requests poured in, for both of us, together. Offers from labels followed. Our phones didn't stop ringing for days. "This is insane," I said on the third morning, scrolling through messages. "I never wanted this kind of attention." Zoe looked up from her own phone. "We can turn it down. Do this on our own terms." "No," I said after a moment's consideration. "Let's ride this wave, but I have conditions." "Name them," she said immediately. "I don't want to move to LA. I like my life in Nashville. I'll come. Here when necessary for recording, promotion, whatever. But Nashville stays my home." She nodded. "Done. And Mom comes first. Before tours, before appearances. If she needs us, everything else waits." "Absolutely." I took a deep breath. "And no more Zoe Blue. If we do this, we do it as the Calloway sisters. Dad's name, our real name." This gave her pause. Zoe Blue was a brand, a recognizable entity with millions of followers. Abandoning it meant starting over in many ways. "The Calloway sisters," she repeated slowly, testing how it sounded. Then she smiled, a genuine smile, not the practiced one she used for cameras. Dad would have loved that. 6 months later, the Calloway sisters released our first EP. 5 songs, all co-written, co-produced, with both our voices equally present. Critical response was overwhelmingly positive. "A stunning reinvention," wrote Rolling Stone. "Authenticity shines through every note," said Billboard. We toured small venues across the country, intimate settings where we could tell stories between songs, where I could gradually get comfortable with the spotlight I'd never sought. Zoe adjusted to the smaller stages with surprising grace, seeming to find joy in the connections with audiences that had been impossible in massive arenas. The mansions, the designer clothes, the extravagant lifestyle, all scaled back as Zoe's priorities shifted. She kept the house in LA but spent more time in Nashville, eventually buying a modest home not far from mine. Mom retired, as promised. The 3 of us had Sunday dinner together whenever we weren't touring. Sometimes it was awkward. Too many. Unspoken hurts still lingering beneath the surface. But it was healing too. Slowly, tentatively, we were becoming a family again. One night after a show in Chicago, Zoe and I sat in the hotel bar, unwinding with a bottle of wine. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Forcing me to bring you in? You could have destroyed my career entirely, taken it all for yourself." I considered the question carefully. No. Destroying you wouldn't have fixed anything. And taking it all for myself? That was never what I wanted. What did you want? "To be seen," I said simply. "To not be erased." She nodded slowly, understanding finally dawning. "And now?" I thought about the past year, the songs we'd written together, the stages we'd shared, the slow rebuilding of trust between us. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments when old tensions flared, when I caught myself waiting for the next betrayal. But there was something else too. A genuine partnership that brought out the best in both of us. "Now I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I said. Zoe raised her glass. "To the Calloway sisters." I clinked my glass against hers. "To being seen." Later that night, as I stood at the hotel window looking out at the Chicago skyline, I thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If I'd chosen vengeance over reconciliation, If Zoe had refused to acknowledge the truth, if either of us had been too proud or too hurt to try again. I thought about Dad, about how he used to tell us music was the language of healing when words failed. He was right, though not in the way he might have imagined. Music had torn us apart, but it had also brought us back together, stronger than before. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed us had become, improbably, the foundation for something true, something lasting, something that honored not just my voice or Zoe's, but the legacy our father had left us both. And in the end, that was the revenge I never knew I needed. Not the destruction of what Zoe had built, but the creation of something neither of us could have built alone.